Three, two, one.
Get him out, get him out, get him out.
Yep. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Shaker Heights. Experiences may vary. I'm Gabe Tolliver.
I'm Eric Green.
And today, we have a star. We truly have a star from our ranks. We're coming to you live from the Van Aken Rapid Stop in our mind. I want to bring to the stage Michael McElroy.
Would you join me, please, in welcoming? Would you join me, please?
Welcome.
Bring him into the middle. Bring him to the middle.
That's right. We're still trying to shop for a studio engineer to help us with this. So, hey, man, like we said, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, for those who don't know, I'm about to read. We're about to give you your flowers, mad flowers. So I'm going to read this intro. Award-winning arranger, composer, producer, actor, educator, and founder, musical director, and arranger for the Broadway Inspirational Voices, a multiracial gospel choir composed of Broadway performers. His Broadway credits include Sunday in the Park with George, 2017 revival, Next to Normal, Rent, in the role of Tom Collins, The Wild Party, The Who's Tommy, Miss Saigon, Patti LuPone on Broadway, High Roller Social Pleasure Club, and Big River, for which he received a Tony nomination for Best Supporting Actor in a Musical for his performance as Jim. His vocal arrangements have been heard in Broadway shows, Disaster and Street Corner Symphony, as well as off-Broadway and regional productions. Michael is also a founding member of the Black Theater United, Music Theater Dance Professionals in the Academy, and Muse, Musicians United for Social Equity, organizations that share a mission of advancing more equitable practices in the performing arts. He also has major academia stints at NYU and University of Michigan, and now is currently the professor and coordinator of musical theater at Howard University, and a member of the Red Raider class of '85. Get live. Michael McElroy. Give this man his flowers.
Thank you.
I'm going to shut up. Now, Eric, you take the wheel.
So,
Catch my breath.
as people are familiar with the format of this show, when did you arrive on the shores of our Shaker Heights community?
I moved to Shaker when I was in fourth grade. I think that was 1976. And it was so funny that I didn't know we moved to Shaker because we literally moved 5 minutes from where we used to live. But, you kind of move across some imaginary line and then you're, in this area. And I grew up in the Moreland area around Chagrin, where it was like all of a sudden, it was a neighborhood of African-American families that had moved from downtown Cleveland and created this middle-class community with all these kids where we left our doors open and we were in and out of each other's homes. And then I was, all of a sudden in the Shaker school system, which started me on an entirely different path.
So what elementary and junior high school did you attend?
I attended, it's in the library now. I attended Moreland. And then I went to Woodbury and then moved up to Shaker.
Okay. And who was your crew? Who was your clique back in those days?
I was a theater and music kid. So it's interesting. One of my closest friends, Julie McGovern, Julie Voisey now, we were in fourth grade together, Miss Talentire's class at Moreland. And because her last name was McGovern and mine was McElroy, we were always in homeroom together. So we traveled through junior high school and high school in homeroom together. And recently she moved from Shaker to New York. And so now we've rekindled our friendship.
Wow.
But I had a German group because I was in German club. So I had my group of friends that I went to Germany with, Karen Merchant and Brian Cote, who are married, Doug Schattinger, Marty Ezel, Maury Insinger. And then I had my choral group, people who were in choir, and then I had my theater group, and they kind of overlapped because I did all the acting ensemble and all the Shaker theater things.
Wow. You really took advantage of the Shaker experience, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, how would you describe your, your childhood? I mean, you touched upon it, the community vibe and
Hmm.
everything. But was music a part of your childhood or your household growing up?
Yeah. My whole life, because my grandfather started a church in downtown Cleveland on Kinsman. And so my mom, my grandmother started playing the piano when she was there. And then when my mom was born, she put her in piano lessons. So my mom played from the time she was 3 years old, and now she's 84. She still plays every Sunday at
Oh,
church.
right on.
But so I
Yeah.
grew up in this family where we were the first family of the church, but also all the musicians in the church. So my sister plays, my brother, my uncle, my mom, my grandmother, all my nieces and nephews play. And so I had this really incredible, and I talk about this all the time, uh, two worlds that I grew up in, Shaker, and all that offered me in terms of the academics and the arts initiatives that could be a part of. But then I also grew up in downtown Cleveland in this Baptist church. So I was exposed to two very different worlds that both filled me with a love of music, a love of service, a respect for community and building community, all that have become kind of the foundations of how I not only live my life, but how I approach my artistry, all those things.
Right on. Right on. Was there like a favorite instrument? Like,
We all
you
played the
gravitate
piano.
all played the piano.
Yeah, my
Okay.
mom and my brother, my mom and my sister and my uncle, and now my nephew, they play the organ as well. I didn't take to the organ, but I played piano. I played for Sunday school. I played for the children's choir. I played for the youth choir. So yeah, piano was my thing.
Do you have a favorite gospel song you like to play?
Oh wow! There's so many amazing gospel songs. I mean, all the favorites. Like "Total Praise" is one of my favorite songs by Richard Smallwood, who is a Howard alum,
Oh,
and uh, "For Every Mountain," which is Kurt Carr. And what's been great is because of BIV, because of Broadway Inspirational Voices, I've gotten to meet a lot of contemporary gospel artists today who have found out about our music and connected with me. So learning to play those songs. I grew up on a lot of Walter Hawkins and the Hawkins family playing
yes.
that music. I love the scope of all kinds of music because all of it was playing in my house, from classical music to gospel music to R&B, and nothing beats the R&B of the 70s
Yes.
ever.
100%.
Um, so I grew up with jazz. My father was a big jazz fanatic, and so I grew up with everything and a love of all kinds of music.
Right
So
on.
when did the theater bug hit you? You said you got here in fourth grade.
Mhm.
Did you involve yourself in community theater? Did you partake in plays at Woodbury Junior High, or when did that all begin?
Well, it's interesting. In fourth grade, when I was at Moreland, we did a field trip down to the Hannah Theater
Mhm.
to see a matinee of a show. And the show, the first year, was Porgy and Bess. And I remember very vividly seeing all of those people on stage who look like me, who are doing something at such a high level of brilliance and talent and technique. And I remember that being a moment when I went, oh, that's possible. I could do that.
Mhm.
Because I'd always been in music, but I didn't ever put it together with theater. And so the next year we went to see The Wiz, the national tour of The Wiz.
I
Oh,
remember I
wow,
was
man.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Love the
And
Wiz.
and it's so funny that the show that we saw, that matinee, Stephanie Mills was out and her understudy was on, and her understudy was a woman named Lilias White, who has now become one of my closest friends, and she's
Oh
also a member
wow.
of Black Theater United.
Wow.
So all the national tours that I would go to see when they came to Cleveland, to the Playhouse area, I've gotten to know people. Leslie Uggams I saw at the Hannah Theater as Maria in West Side Story, and she's become a friend and person I've worked with. So once again, it was about having that access
Yeah.
and the value of going down and hearing the Cleveland Symphony, which they would take us down there or to the museums.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of access, that kind of importance. I think we grew up at a really magical time where the arts were considered an integral part of how
Yes.
we train, engage young minds and hearts. And
Yes.
sadly, we're seeing that start to go away. but we grew up at a time where that was really important. So Shaker had, great choral programs, bands, orchestra, dance programs, theater programs. And so I got involved at Woodbury with a teacher named Miss Voss, who was my English teacher. And I started getting involved in theater and starting to do theater there, and then moved into it when I went to Shaker.
Yeah, Caramoo House, that was very integral in
Mhm.
my growing up, and a lot of my mom's friends that we were always talking about Caramoo House and
Mhm.
making trips down there and seeing the Wiz. That brought back a lot of memories.
Yeah,
For
I
me,
was in
so
the Wiz. I was in the Wiz at Caramoo.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't tell the truth. I said I was. What did I say? I said I was 16, so I could get in the show, but I was actually 14.
Okay.
And the guy who directed it, Mike Malone, is actually the guy who started the musical theater program that I now am the coordinator of.
Wow. Everything's coming full circle for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you then officially get your equity card at 16, or did you get it at 14?
I didn't get it until I graduated from Carnegie Mellon. I came to New York. My first show was Shakespeare in the Park, New York Shakespeare
Mhm.
Festival, and it was
Yes.
Richard III with Denzel Washington. And then after that, I got the national tour Serafina, and that's when I got my equity card.
Okay. I know you must have some Denzel stories. I mean, that dude is, the consummate professional.
Yeah, yeah.
A little intimidating.
Yes, very much so. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a woman named Mary Alice who was also in the show.
Yes. Sister Mary Alice.
Who that was who I really gravitated towards, because I
Yeah.
remember the movie Sparkle when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And actually, she actually replaced another actress who passed away in the Matrix movies.
Yes.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so I would, as it became my tradition, whenever I would get into a show with someone that I grew up watching, I would
Mhm.
kind of be respectful and keep my distance until we got friendly. And then I'd be like, tell me everything.
Yeah.
Tell me everything about your life. Tell me.
Yeah.
I did a show with Diane Carroll, and I waited, and I was like,
Wow.
can we go to lunch?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that knowledge, that hunger for legacy and respect of, what formed me as an artist and as an African-American person were the images I saw, the people that I saw, the theater that I was exposed to, the education that I was exposed to, but, the sense of pride in oneself.
Yes.
Was, we got to see manifest in so many different ways as we were growing up, that I really wanted to make sure when I met those people that I not only thanked them, but connected with them to really hear their stories.
Yeah.
So how early, when did you make that decision that this was going to be your life? And who was integral? Who's the one that convinced you and you said, okay, now I heard it from this person and that's all I need? Or did you even need that?
That's an interesting question, Eric, because actually I didn't know what I wanted to do in high school. I was doing theater, I was doing music, but I didn't know if I wanted to go the music route or the singing route or the theater route. And remember, when we were in high school, there was no internet. So, we'd have these people who would come from colleges to do like talks, and you could get out of a class and go and see whoever this person was. And I had a trigonometry test that I don't think that I was really as prepared for as I should have been. But there was a college a person there, a recruiter there. And so I went to hear him speak, and it was Carnegie Mellon.
Mm.
And he gave us a flyer that had this thing that said there was a drama department and you could do musical theater, which was, music, theater, dance. And I took it home to my mom, and she goes, well, there's a date where we can go visit. Let's go visit. So we got in the car and went. And from the time that I walked onto that campus, I was like, this is what I want to do. But if it hadn't been for that test that I didn't study for, and it just so happened that the recruiter from Carnegie Mellon was there that day, I probably would have found my way, but it would have been a different path.
Right.
Okay.
Wow. It's always those little things, could be those tipping points.
Right.
Yeah. Who knew?
How does that? Let me ask you: do they recruit for that type of thing as they do for athletics? I mean, nowadays, do they recruit for talent to go into schools?
Well, it's a little bit different. There are all kinds of pre-college programs. So at Carnegie Mellon, for example, in high school, you can pay to attend a pre-college program, and it gives you an opportunity to work with some of the professors and see what it would be like if you actually went to that school. Most of the
Okay.
musical theater and theater programs, arts programs, music programs usually have them at most of the major institutions. Michigan has it, NYU has it, Carnegie Mellon, and so you get an opportunity as a high schooler in your the junior year, before your senior year, when you have to do all the applications, you get an opportunity to see what it's like.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they get an inkling by seeing you too. So they
Yeah.
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 Representation matters,
Yeah.
especially, for kids of color.
Yeah.
Like with high school, were there any like memorable moments at Shaker that, that immediately come to mind? I mean, you might have thousands of them or something, but like in terms of, being there,
Well, for me, it was all about the theater and the choir room. That's
Mhm.
where I lived. Mr. Everson was the head of the choral program, and so I was in his office and in that choir room a lot, and then I was in the theater room.
Mhm.
And so my memories are centered around those two spaces,
Yeah.
and the theater. And then, my year was the year that my junior year, I think, was the year that we started New Stages, which was we built that little theater downstairs below the main stage. And I think it's got its like 40 something anniversary coming up. It's really frightening,
Wow.
the numbers. But that I just
Yeah.
lived at the school. I lived
Yeah.
at Shaker, going to classes and then being there for rehearsals at night. And it really was an idyllic time. It really was a magical time, to grow up in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Very supportive, nurturing. All right. So Carnegie Mellon and your decision to go to NYC. And I think about the Stevie Wonder song, Living for the City reference, skyscrapers,
Mhm.
everything. You coming
Mhm.
from the Midwest. Talk about arriving in New York and, what year was that?
Yeah, I actually always knew for some reason that I wanted to be in New York City. I hadn't been there, but
Yeah.
I knew that's where I wanted to go. And remember when we were growing up, there was there was an ad campaign. New York City is the Big Apple, but Cleveland's the plum. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the bumper sticker on my
Yeah.
bed.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
Terminal Tower, and
Yeah.
I remember there was these series of commercials. I love New York, and you see
Yes.
these actors, the cats, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I knew that's where I wanted to go. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I just knew for some reason that was going to be where I was going to build my life once I graduated and moved there. So I got accepted. So when I came time to audition for schools, I actually flew to New York, stayed with my sister's friend in Long Island, and I auditioned for NYU and I auditioned for Carnegie Mellon. I got into both, but I decided to go to Carnegie Mellon because coming from Shaker, I was nervous about moving directly to New York while I was in high school, not because I was nervous about the city, but because I was nervous about the distraction of the city.
Yeah. City was wild, man. City was
So
wild.
I did a bypass. I went to Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
where I learned to be on my own for the first time.
Okay.
Live by myself, live with roommates, have that $5 bill that's going to last me all week. And,
Yeah.
and, just learning all the things about what it meant to be an adult before you have to really be an adult.
Yeah.
And then in 1990, I graduated from Carnegie, and they did this incredible thing, which we still do now, where they would bring their seniors to New York and we put together a show which casting directors, agents, people in the industry would come and see. And from
Nice.
that, you would get meetings to go see this casting director or this agent. And from that, go down to the public theater, audition for Shakespeare in the Parks, which is the
Yes.
third. So I went down there, auditioned, got it, then went back to Carnegie, graduated, and then moved to New York. My best friend from Shaker, Mara Murphy, had gone to SUNY Purchase. And so she was graduating at the same time, and we moved in together
Wow.
in Long Island City.
All right. So give me like a welcome to New York moment. And I'll share mine after you share yours. Like, coming from the Midwest, if you have one.
I remember getting stuck in the city. There was a big rainstorm and the subway stopped, and I couldn't figure out how to get from Manhattan to Long Island City. It didn't connect. Michael, just get in a cab.
Right.
So I was just kind of wandering around.
Yeah.
sometimes ignorance is bliss, because even when I went to audition for schools, I was
Yeah.
just, that was the 80s. So New
Yeah.
York City was
Yes.
really tricky in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I
I'm
was just
talking.
kind of wandering around, looking up at everything, just kind of happening to get on the right subway to end up in the right place.
Yeah.
But there was a sort of innocence, but a real kind of like, this is my home.
Yeah.
And so I just loved it. And
Yeah.
right after I got there, I was there for 3 months, and then I was on tour for almost a year.
Wow. Wow. Nonstop, man.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're making yourself at home in New York.
Yeah.
And as we all know, because, like, for example, I lived up there from 1989 on and off to like 2015. New York can be a hard city on the mind, body, and spirit for artists.
Hmm.
Did, did the dream ever feel like deferred at times, like on Broadway, while, like you would be on tour, come back home? Were there like any gaps between jobs and you're like, man, you know, you know, like having your metal tested, you know?
Yeah. Well, there were gaps between these jobs, but I never felt the gaps
Yeah.
because I started Broadway Inspirational Voices in 1994. So I was
Okay.
4 years in. And so I was always doing something with the choir as the choir continued to evolve and to grow from 11 people to almost 65, more than 65 by the
Wow.
time I left after 27 years. And it's still ongoing, about to celebrate its 30th anniversary. And so when I wasn't doing theater, which was rare, I was writing and arranging, or the choir was recording with some recording artist, or we were performing somewhere. So I never felt like I was artistically barren. There was
Okay.
always something going on. That didn't mean I always had money,
Right.
but artistically,
Yeah.
because I was fed, because really going back to Shaker again, I wrote 3 musicals at Shaker in high school because I was like,
Ooh,
I want to write
okay.
something. And the head of the theater program at that time, Mr. Thornton, was like, write it. And we were given space to create new work. We were encouraged. So every artistic like impulse we had was encouraged. So I started writing. I didn't write before, my junior year in high school. And so that became something that evolved into me becoming a composer and arranger for BIV. But that started at Shaker because I was given the platform and we wrote these. I don't know if you remember Charles Drew.
Yes.
What's
R.I.P.,
funny?
man.
Yeah. But what's funny is that I'm at Howard in May talking to one of the faculty members who's in acting, and I'm in musical theater, and we're talking, and she goes, "Did you know Charles Drew?" And I was like, "I wrote musicals with Charles Drew in high school." She goes, "He was one of my best friends." So she's
Yeah.
sending me pictures of when she and Charles used to do things in New York, and she directed his plays that he wrote. And so once again, the world gets so small.
Yeah.
But Charles and I wrote musicals together in high school because we said, we want to do this. And Mr. Thornton said, here's the place, here are the students, y'all go do it. Right. And so that allowed me to always have multiple artistic kind of pathways that weren't dependent on somebody else giving me a job.
Right. Charles, man. Good brother, man.
Yeah.
How can we explain this? And I mean, you partly explained how, with the proximity to University Circle, the cultural hub, I would say, of Ohio, and just where we were located and the time. But I speak to this because a friend of mine, I attended the Cleveland Institute of Art, and just doing this podcast, I didn't realize how artistically and creatively rich our time at Shaker was. And the percentages are just insane. I mean, we interview people and I talk to people, and just the volume of people that are involved, that were involved in the arts, it's just unbelievable. And I have a theater bend. You're in theater, so I have to bring this up. I have an idea for a musical because I want to do some comedy. I was thinking about doing some stand-up comedy, and I was writing a musical which I never thought I would write, called Homeschool Musical,
Mhm.
about kids being homeschooled and, going through that sort of like the Book of Mormons, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But what do you attribute that to? I mean, I write poetry. I never thought I would do that. Come late in life, I have a friend named James Longs who's involved with a band in his 50s that's worldwide called Morning of Black Star, Black Futurist R&B band. So just, I know I'm going over, but I'll let you answer the question the best way that you feel.
No, I think what you're saying is exactly right. I really do believe that we grew up in a sweet spot of this, what I call, and what was called at the time, the Great Experiment, right? Where, Shaker was integrating and becoming more diverse as more African American families were moving from Cleveland area into the suburbs. And, you know, that level of diversity. And what was interesting, Moreland, where I went, was predominantly African American kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember having a conversation with Julie about this, and her mom was she was a high school. She worked in the office for like college, helping you with college prep and things like that. And when it came time to choose where she was going to go to school, they were like sort of busing, and you could kind of choose. And her parents intentionally chose Moreland, which was predominantly African American, and she's white, for her to go because they wanted her to have a different kind of an experience and to not be the majority and to navigate. And some of the things that have shaped Julie, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, in terms of her college years and becoming an urban planner and doing all the things that she does, and a real love and respect of the arts and supporter of the arts, was because of her parents making that choice to send her to Moreland at that time. And it really shifted and defined her perspective on life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I feel like those kinds of experiments and experiences that Shaker offered at that time were incredibly valuable. It doesn't mean that it was always easy. It doesn't mean that it was not without its challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But the opportunity, like I was a AP person. So, when you were an AP student, there were like two lines, right? Where you were in groups with all of these people, so you kind of traveled through your classes together, and with these two separate groups. But I was not. I was one of the few. It was like me and Michael Tate and Marlene and Darlene Pope and Jonathan Lim, who I went to elementary school with. But there was a small group of students of color who went through that pathway, whereas there was a bigger group of African American students who didn't always get encouraged to step into that space.
Right.
Even if they were getting straight A's in their classes. And so I just bring that up to say that it was not without its challenges.
So did you have challenges getting into that space? Because we've read in the book and we've talked to people about, it was a problem getting African Americans enrolled in those classes. They weren't exactly encouraged to do that. Did you face any of that when you were at Shaker, or?
I was lucky. I was doing it at Woodbury, and then in my 9th grade year, I almost didn't pass junior high school because I was doing the whiz at Karamu and not going to classes. And my mom's a school teacher. And one day, because I forgot to bring the mop back downstairs to the basement so she came down and she caught me and she was like, "I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to the corner if you're not at school." Now, I lived on Ludgate off of Chagrin, and Shaker and Woodbury was, at least a 30-minute walk.
Yeah.
And she's like, "If you're not at that school, by the time I get to the corner, there's going to be something to pay." And so I had to work, because that's when I made the connection. Oh, if I don't get my grades together, this actually affects college, because 9th grade is where they start looking. And so I started working really hard to get my grades up. And luckily, I had enough support with key faculty who saw something in me and encouraged me. At Woodbury, Mr. Harley was one, for example. Miss Voss was another who really, really encouraged me and made sure I got on that path. And then once you're on it in 10th grade, I was in AP English, AP History, Math. AP was challenging, but I did it.
Wow.
But I consider myself to be really fortunate that I had enough faculty who saw something in me that sometimes I didn't even see in myself and encouraged me.
And you didn't feel any peer pressure or anything like that? Because a lot of times that dissuades people from taking that path.
Well, I was always the crazy theater kid. You know what I mean? I was already strange anyway. I was singing in choir and I was in the theater, so I was already kind of othered in that way. So it was all good.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, man. It always comes back to a community of folks on one's journey. Like it's like makes me think about that MLK quote about the ground crew
Hmm.
with the air. Yeah. There's always a ground crew under your wings that
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure that you fly.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, right on. So random question. You got these awards and accolades and stuff. Where do you keep your statues? You got like a shelf or a closet.
It's so funny. They're sitting right there. I didn't take them. I never take them. When I moved to Michigan, I didn't take them with me. When I moved to DC, I didn't take them with me. They just live here. They're
Okay.
sitting over there on that table.
Okay. Just, just had to ask randomly. You know. So let's tell us a little bit more about Broadway,
Hmm.
about BIV,
Okay.
because for me, like I saw a video of the little island,
Hmm.
and I was like, how did I miss out
Theater,
on
yeah.
visiting that spot?
Mm.
So tell us about your connection with that and with BIV and stuff.
Is once again, it comes back to, and I tell my students this all the time that um, talent is important, but reputation is everything,
Yeah.
right? Because you never know the person sitting next to you will 10 years from now, you never know who they'll be.
Right.
And it's not that you're kind for those reasons. It's just good to be kind.
Right.
And back in 1991, when I returned from tour of Sarafina, I was cast as a swing. And a swing in a show means that you cover multiple roles.
Oh, okay.
And
Wow.
I was the male swing for this new musical downtown, and then there was a female swing. And this woman from 1991, we were swings, became really good friends. And then after a few years, she left the city and kind of went off and got into theater administration in regional theaters in the Midwest. Turns out to be the person that was charged with heading Little Island from its beginnings to its building to all the steps, hiring the artistic director who then hired the first 4 artists in residence who would have 3 years to create and bring in any kind of art that they wanted to do in all 3 areas. And right at in the middle of the pandemic, sorry, I got a call from this woman who said, I'm wondering if you want to be an artist in residence at this place called Little Island that we're building off of the Hudson, of the highway. And I was like, well, I have this choir. She goes, well, we're interested in you and the choir, but really it's about you and what
Wow.
you want to do for 3 years, given this space. Because
Yeah.
at the foundation of the mission was making sure that all the people who went there, who are a representation of New York City, they wanted to make sure that the artists, the art that was generated there, the people who worked there were a representation of New York City.
Yeah.
And once I said yes, then I get a call from Trish, who was this woman that we were swings together in 1991. She's the executive director of Little Island, but she couldn't contact me until I said yes to the artist in residence.
Right.
And it turns out she was the driving force behind the building, the what was going to be happening there, all of those things. And so once again, you never know. And my first thing there was to end up doing my farewell concert with BIV, which opened the amphitheater on Little Island. And
Yeah.
we opened literally a couple weeks after the mask ban had ended for outdoor masks in New York City.
All right.
Literally, the island opened the day after that ban was lifted. And then our concert was maybe a couple weeks later.
That's very poetic. The island opened as
Yeah.
the pandemic went away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Amazing. Let's see here. So tell us a little bit now, you make this transition to academia, theater academia. I mean, like it was that transition like night and day in a lot of ways, going into upper level, college.
It's interesting. So I was touring with Rent, and it was I was out for more than a year, and we started in January of I want to say 2009. In fact, we opened the national tour in Cleveland
Oh wow!
at the Ohio or the State Theater, one of the two theaters down there, and that was January, right after New Year's. In October, we were in Appleton, Wisconsin. We had just left Cincinnati, and I got the swine flu. And so for a week, I missed the show. The entire Appleton week, I was either in my hotel room or I was in the hospital. And after that, my voice never fully came back. It was a real challenge, kind of recovering and getting back to an 8-show week. And I remember having this small voice in my head that kind of went, yeah, I think I'm coming to the end of wanting to do this as the focus of my career, being a performer. And I always knew it wasn't going to be my end game. But I loved it and did it for over 25 years. And then we were on the West Coast, and I got a call from a guy named Kent Gash, who went to Carnegie Mellon many years before me. And they were starting a new musical theater program at NYU in undergraduate drama. And would I be interested in applying for this position? I said yes. When the tour ended, I went in, I did the whole process and was offered this position as head of vocal performance. And then it became, oh crap, what am I going to do? And then it became, how do I take what I've learned in my 24 years and now teach it while also building a curriculum for young artists who want to do this as well? And my mom was a school teacher. She taught in the Cleveland school system for over 30 years. Never thinking in a million years that I would go into teaching. But what academia offered was an opportunity to once again give back. So it was service, which was a very important part of my life in my formative years. But it also, academia offers you the opportunity to teach, but they also want you to continue your work. So I was either writing and bringing in my students to try, or I was leaving for 2 weeks or a month to go off and do this show or go off and do this performance, because that kind of active engagement of your art reflects back on the university, on the institution, and they want you to have that.
Of course, yeah.
So academia has been the best of both worlds. I can teach, I can create new work for my students, and I can also still go off and do professional work as well. And have some kind of stability, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah, because this quote that of yours really stood out to me, and you said, "I know what the long-term journey is. I can now help students understand what longevity is in a career and the importance of reputation, consistency, building relationships, having joy in the room. All these things that the world in which we live doesn't always help you to cultivate." And when I read that,
said that.
Yeah. But
that's what it said. You said
That's good. I'm gonna have to keep that.
We'll send it to you.
But, I mean, the fact that you said that, and these students coming through, I hope they better motherfucking recognize the gold you are bringing to them. I mean, with this life behind words, because these words resonate, because when I think about my own career in film and TV, coming up through NYU and a few other things, I didn't necessarily have mentors or people to put me on game or code. Sometimes it was, you live and learn and stuff like that. And the fact that mentoring, I feel, is lacking in a lot of our arts nowadays, in a lot of places. And so the fact that you're locked in on that, this speaks volumes. It's important.
So. Well, I was lucky. Like I said, once again, I can go back to Mrs. Kirkpatrick, who was my music teacher at Moreland, who saw something in me and said, here, you come out here, you do this, you play this, you learn this, you sing this, right? And then in junior high school, Mr. Moss, who was the head of the choral program, Mrs. Voss, Mr. Harley, I had, once again, key people there. But I also had that same thing in my life through church and through my uncle, who was a musical director, and my sister and my mom, who were musicians, who, instilled certain things in me. So there were always people at key moments who were saying, I see something in you. I'm going to challenge you to step into the fullness of what that is. So mentoring and giving back has always been a vital part of how I see my life and my life as an artist, as a teacher, because I had so many examples of it around me, but also had some people doing it and pouring into me.
Yeah.
And I do agree. We live in this, I say this all the time, growing up in Shaker, I had 10 friends who I was in school with who lived on my block. And so anything that we did was community driven. We were outside until the street lights went on. We were in a new album came out. We went over to someone's house to listen to it. Everything was community driven. And what has happened with the internet and social media, as it has made young people insular and very isolated. So you don't ever have to leave your house to do anything really besides go to school. And so they've lost that socialization that comes from just being in a community and being a young person, right? And then you're an artist, and everything about us is about the human experience. And if you're not living the human experience, how can you then portray the human experience or write about the human experience? And so part of what our job has become, and I saw this shift happening early in my teaching career, was teaching life skills.
Yes.
So that you could actually do the art.
Right.
Because though it has given us, I once again, this goes back to Shaker again, we grew up at a time where our worlds were incredibly small, right? It was you lived in a beautiful, idyllic space that had its challenges, but we were not exposed to what was happening in the world at large, right? I didn't know about the AIDS epidemic until I moved to New York, right? Which was a huge part of the theater community. But I didn't know anything about that because, once again, our worlds were small. Today, young people's worlds are large, but that doesn't mean that it's actually instilling in them certain skills that it takes to be a part of the community, to be community driven, to be an artist, to be someone who has the skills to connect to other human beings. And so being an artist and being a teaching artist gives me the opportunity to try to instill those skills at the same time as I'm teaching the skills that go with being an artist in my field.
So let me ask both of you this, and I've had this conversation with a friend of mine that I went to college with who works in Hollywood. And what he sees, a trend that he's seeing, he's seeing that the art and the work ethic is contributing to the lowering and the decrease of the quality of the work. Are you seeing that or feeling that with the insulary conditions that kids are doing? They're remaining insular and they don't have that socialization that a lot of us had, that type of thing. Do you see that, or do you see it coming out, the creativity coming out in a different way? Or do you see both,
You want to take that first, Gabe, or you want me to take it?
I'll take a stab at it. I can talk about it maybe from the film and TV aspect of things, because I did a teaching stint at Cleveland State's film and TV program. And I think for quite a few of the students, they lacked a lot of media literacy and the understand and the idea of reference and context. Like they don't. Some of them didn't understand that, especially in my neck of the woods, it's a process, and depending upon a lot of people, depending on finances and everything else. But what it really came down to, you had to put in the work, as a PA, and then work your way up. Or if you wanted to be a writer, you had to write. And I think a lot of them came in thinking that they could go from A to J, J to K, and sometimes with this little bit of entitlement. And then I'll take it a step further. Being one of the few teachers of color as a male, there was also this thing of I have to prove to you that I belong in this space teaching, and I've done this or done that. So it was, again, it's, experiences may vary, but I think, our media society, it's overstimulated in a lot of ways. It, it shows you all the shortcuts and not the hard work. So,
I agree 100% with everything you just said. I think I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a brilliant artist who is writing a piece and working with young artists in the room. She said there seems to be so much talent, incredible talent, but a lack of curiosity.
yes.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
it's this thing that I think social media has robbed this generation of, which is everything you hit a button and there's the answer.
Instant
And
gratification. Yeah.
and I call it, there's a lack of what I call card catalog thinking, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
wanted a book,
Yeah.
I would walk up to the Shaker Library.
Yeah.
I would give them my card. I would go and look in the card catalog. I had to know how to the decimal system. I had to know all the things. I had to go to the shelves, find it, had to bring it out. I had to bring it to the front desk. I had to give them my card and then get it stamped out, go home, bring it back. So our minds were process driven because
Mhm.
we had to be process driven because there was a lack of access to things that were quick, right?
Yes.
And so when you want to be an artist or any field, there is a process that you go through that was, a part of our growing up was if you wanted to get here, you had to do step by step by step by step.
Mhm.
Social media and this exposure to immediate kind of people who have become famous for nothing. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, or on social media, you're seeing first day of rehearsal, I got this Broadway show, and you didn't see the struggles or the
Yeah.
sacrifices or the
Mhm.
times when you did with all the no's you received. And so
Right.
you have a generation that has been brought up with this kind of like seeing the result, but not the process.
Yes.
And for us, there was a lot of harm that my generation had in terms of how things were done to us.
Mhm.
So there has to be a middle ground. Right?
Right.
Where it's not one extreme where, but what I did love about it was if you had a question, people would say, you don't need to know the answer right now. Be in the
Mhm.
question, figure it out.
Right.
Whereas I found with my students, I have to explain everything
Yes.
so that when those challenges come up and they start to get, excited or and not in a positive way, but triggered in a certain way, I'm able to say, remember, this is what we talked about. And it kind of
Mhm.
calms things down. But
Right.
that process of struggle, of failure,
Yes.
and getting back up is what helps you to learn how to be resilient.
It's got to be
Yes.
there. It's got to be
Yeah.
there. The analog. We're the last of the analog generation.
My
Yes.
friend just said that the other day.
We're pure
Yes.
digital, and we've
Yeah.
got too many hamburger helpers out there.
Yeah.
As an AI and all the other stuff, digital. You don't have to play an instrument to make music, which it helps me. I mean, it's
Mhm.
fun, but I don't know. I'm trying to learn the guitar so that I have some semblance of what things are, what the basics are, and
Mhm.
so I don't have to rely on the digital, and I know the history or the techniques and all that. But a lot of stuff is just technique driven these days because of those digital apparatus that helps them just learn things quickly. Like for
Mhm.
instance, I had to expand a background for a piece of artwork, and usually I'd have to really think about how I could do this and make it look convincing. Now I just tell generative AI on my Photoshop just to lengthen the background, and it does it. It's good, but it's bad, but it makes everything more consumable and less. If everybody can do it, I think it brings the value of everything down.
Mhm.
But also to your point, to add on, Eric, you already, like Michael said, you have this process history. So when you're interfacing with the generative AI, you have reference and context to
Hmm.
get it to where you need it to be from that process
Mhm.
Right.
generational thing. So it makes a big difference. I mean, I could say, like, when I did a short stint in the Army, and I had a off thing with, like, one of the drill sergeants, and he said, the frustrating thing for me was, meaning him, he had to be a reparenter, and he's like, I'm here to train soldiers, but I have to be a reparenter. And that was a very frightening, disconcerting thing, in that neck of the world regarding this whole thing with, young people and, just feeling a sense of entitlement and not doing good with, with not having enough grit or perseverance and
Mhm.
resiliency, as you say. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
all of
have a
us
hard
have
time.
been, yeah, all of us. I mean, both Gabe and I have been adjunct professors, and that is a hard barrier to get through because kids know everything, and everything's online, and everything's accessible, and everything's quick, and everything's instant.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and if you clap back at a student in a constructive way, it's like it's a dicey thing.
Yep.
Oh, he insulted me, he made me feel uncomfortable.
Yep. Yep. And then the next thing you know, parents are calling, and
Yeah, yeah,
it really is. I was just having a conversation last week with a friend who said we straddle the analog and digital world. We're the last generation that does.
yeah,
Hmm.
And this idea um, that you can skip steps, and that has now become. It's not even about skipping the steps. It's like I should have it. I
right,
want it as of
Hmm.
yesterday. And how do we? And not all, but it is a generational kind of
yeah,
mentality that you have to come up against. And this idea. This is what I was going to say is that when we grew up in Shaker, you know, education was viewed in a certain way and teachers were viewed in a certain way, that
hmm,
they had the knowledge and you were there to learn it,
yeah,
right? And our parents supported the teacher
yes,
and they supported the education system. And my mom being a school teacher, the worst days for me was when we had parent teachers conferences and I'd have to sit there while my teachers would talk about me and my behavior in front of my mom, who was a teacher, right? But there was a community mentality around the support of education and the people who were instilling that education to the
yes,
to the population.
yes,
Somewhere along the line that flipped,
yeah,
and parents begin to protect or to defend their children against teachers.
yes,
Teaching became less valued,
yeah,
and that's not just in terms of community mentality but also in financially in our communities.
mhm,
You look at places like in some of the like Finland and those places where they have to go through years and years of education before you can step in
Yes,
front of
they have to be
a
doctors.
yes, right. And so we have lost that, and our education since when you get to academia now, it is a consumer space.
mhm,
So
Yes.
as teachers, you're always trying to straddle this line of how much do I say before I get called in
yes,
because
yes,
I've hurt some child's feelings or I've pushed them too hard and mental health has become a thing that we have to pay attention to and is a real thing,
yeah,
and how do we straddle that line between really making sure that we are pushing students, giving them the tools they need to have a fulfilling, robust life as an artist and human being, while also knowing that one push too far could end you up in trouble, right? So it's just a different thing. And once again, that's why I look at our time as being idyllic, and in the sense that it doesn't exist anymore in that way.
yeah,
Yeah, I point to when teachers started teaching based on competency tests so
Mhm.
that they could keep their jobs. Another landmark was a milestone, not a milestone, but a landmark was when Phoenix University and online teaching started to happen. So you were
mhm,
paying for your degree as much or more than earning your degree. And unfortunately, I learned a lot of that upfront and personal because when I was in school, you just did not, you just had to do another year, and it was the reputation of the university.
yeah,
They didn't want to put someone out into the world that had a diploma from a school that wasn't competent and that was interviewing for jobs. But I don't think that holds any water anymore.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah, going to Carnegie Mellon and being a part of the drama department, it was that on steroids because it was like they graduate, they would take in maybe 48, 50 students and graduate 16 with a cut system, where from the first semester of your freshman year through to the end of your sophomore year, every semester you could potentially be cut.
Wow.
And for things that were minuscule or identity things, weight, young women were getting what they called fat letters, lose 20 pounds or you're cut, those, I mean, it was really harmful.
Yeah.
But it also was another level of excellence in terms of in your class, you were going to do those assignments. You were going to do those rehearsals with your scene partner because I'm not going to get cut because of you, right? So it was a harmful space in some ways, but it also embedded in us a way of working hard all the time.
Right.
And for the university, we're graduating these people who are ambassadors of our program. So they're going to be the top of the top. Now, the way they went about doing it was harmful, but it really did instill in me, it built on what I had from Shaker, a way of working, so that when I went into the professional world, there was no shift in how I worked. I worked hard and I worked all the time because that was just what it was. And so, but you see that it's changing now, and exactly in the ways that you're talking about. And how do we give young people the tools that they need? How do we teach them what they don't know, what they think they don't know what they don't know, right? And so even just, it's so funny you say, just yesterday or 2 days ago, I had a student who was in my first year of teaching at NYU who called me because they were actually being offered a principal contract on a Broadway show and needed me because they didn't have an agent. And I helped them to connect them with an agent to help them to navigate what that contract should be. So they were asking for all the right things. And once again, it goes to, this was a person that I poured into in their first year, but kept a positive relationship with me.
Right. Yes.
Right.
It's all about relationships.
Not knowing that they would need me. 15 years later, not knowing
Yeah.
that they would need me. And so this idea of every time you walk into a space, we know that you have to, that you never know who's going to be that person 5 years
100%.
from now. But now that's looked at as a harmful thing to say. If I say that to a student, that's a harmful thing. I felt threatened by that, or I felt, so it's like, but those are important things that they don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't want them to have to learn those lessons when they get out there, when it really does matter.
Yeah.
Now,
Carnegie Mellon, even though their approach might have been harsh, they did prepare you for what was really out there.
Yeah. My career, nothing was as challenging as what I went through at Carnegie Mellon. Now, there's some questionable things there, but what I will always take away was a respect that was built on from Shaker, from Mr. Thornton and Mr. Everson, and was a respect for the arts, that it was hard work, that it was joyful, and that you are always meeting people, and that how you enter a space can affect 5 years, 10 years from now. So always lead with excellence, with grace, with humility, but always bringing the best of who you are into a space.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the arts in general have been diluted because they're consumed so much and because of the discussion that we just had?
Yes. I think the first understanding I had of that was American Idol, when I saw that all of a sudden you have these people who can become famous from a TV show who haven't, I forget who said this quote, but the elevator to success is broken, use the stairs. But who lost that connection. And then I saw a young man who could not sing, who became an internet sensation with over 2 million likes on YouTube for bad singing. And I went, oh, wow, what do we value now?
Yeah.
And as we see reality TV and all these things that now have robbed us of just common decency, that has become normalized to be nasty, to be rude, to throw a drink in someone's face, or right? These things have been normalized in our society now. And the same thing with our art is that we have and you can go to, it has given you a certain kind of platform, which is wonderful because you don't have to go through all of the normal pathways in order to find that success. And that has been great for some people to build these things on TikTok and become, who have real talent. but it also has given a platform to people who maybe don't, who now have become, celebrated.
Yeah.
Kardashians, the things that Paris, all
Yeah.
these things that aren't
Yeah.
about anything,
No, vapid,
Exactly.
vapid, meaningless.
that
Yeah.
have millions and millions of people who follow them, who now look at that and view, if they can do it for having no talent whatsoever,
Yeah.
then I should be able to do it.
Yeah. It's like, to me, sometimes it's like the equivalent in our community. And this is a certain generalization within our community because our community is not monolithic. Rapper, NBA ball player, football player, and just the tunnel vision and the idea that, oh, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. And no tools for that. No life skills, no life tools. Well, you may not make it.
Mhm.
And how do you navigate?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And what if you do make it and then you get injured? What then?
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Right.
And at the same time, I want to say that I have met some incredibly brilliant young artists who are doing the thing, who
Yes.
are working
Mhm.
hard,
Yeah.
who are coming in the room with curiosity and passion and want what you have to offer.
Yeah.
So once again, it's not all one thing. It's just that it's pervasive across
Yes.
our society.
Yes.
And how do we battle that when that was simply not the way we were raised?
Exactly.
Right. And
All that
it
stuff is
starts
important.
from respecting the art,
Mhm.
and knowing that you respect the people that came from you before you, and you pay respect to them as you pursue your art and doing something different.
Yeah. But that's also a part of the way once again, I was raised. It was respect, period. Respect for your elders. I mean, on our street, anybody could discipline me who was a parent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, real talk.
I mean,
I
there
was
was
the worst.
yes. And then you had to go home and get it again,
Yeah.
right? But that sense of respect and that sense
Yeah.
of understanding what shoulders you stand on,
Yes.
that doesn't exist as much. And I said this to a student
No.
in class last year. I said, does the term standing on the shoulders mean anything to you all? And they were like, not really. And I thought, oh, we are missing something here. We're missing. Social media has robbed some of our young people of this understanding of where they come from and how that legacy is important to know and to learn so that I understand where I exist on the continuum today.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about grievance. It's all about grievance. That's what drives the economy of the entertainment economy, if you will. It's about the reality shows. It's about the beef between Drake and
Kendrick.
Kendrick. It's all of that. It's politics and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So until we address that, we're going to get more of this.
Yeah.
But also, too, it comes from home. And you have to establish that value, that bar at home.
Mhm.
And sometimes I feel there's some that don't know what they don't know. So they're just continue on with a faulty foundation going forward.
Yeah.
Maybe in the extreme sense, we got to be like Mao with the Red Book. And we have our own version of the Mao's Red Book for these folks to understand. And I'm being facetious, but in that own way. But especially if for of color, knowledge of self, and the shoulders.
Right.
Mandatory visits to the Blacksonian.
Yeah.
Mandatory visits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's shifting the way that I teach. I mean, I'm teaching the history of musical theater in the fall in a couple of weeks, and I'm shifting the whole thing to really look at the contributions that African Americans made to the musical theater field, that without the African American genres of music that were created here, from spirituals to ragtime to country and classic blues to jazz, there would be no musical theater, right?
No,
And there were more than just composers that they don't know and lyricists and producers. There were people who owned publishing companies, who owned record labels, who that we just have been robbed of that history, and it's there. So I'm making my students go and look at it and understand, how does this relate to who I am? Where was this thing created? Without African Americans and the journey that we came to this country and endured, there is no American music.
No.
Yes.
Our music is the
100%.
foundation of every form of music that is created in this country. And our students don't know that. Our young people don't know that. So I'm like, we're going to go back and we're going to look at that. And we're going to look at the cultural, what was happening in the world at that time, the social political landscape, and how
Yeah.
that affected the art that was being created so that you can understand that it's all related.
We this whole segment should be called Coming Full Circle,
Mm.
because Black culture has created American culture. We are
Mhm.
responsible for American culture. And look what's going on. Look what, I hate to bring in politics, but the Black woman who's responsible much for any civil rights that anybody has in the United States, much less anywhere else, has to come up and try to clean up things once again.
Yeah.
So everything comes full circle, even though the playbook is the playbook, but the cleanup people are always the cleanup people. And the people, the all the work and all the genius and all the stuff and all the hard work that we put into this country, we've yet to experience the flowers and the all the stuff that we put into it. We haven't gotten the accolades. We're still trying, but it's just, we got to work at it. We have to respect our own genius. I think that's
Mm.
what it comes down to,
But you
and
can't do that if
demand
you
that
don't know. Yeah.
respect.
You
Yeah.
can't do that unless you know your foundation. And another thing you said that, Eric, that sparked something for me was talking about the divisiveness that we see in the country, that it's such a breath of fresh air to hear a political voice that's talking about joy. It almost
Yes.
seems foreign, and we don't even know what we're hungry for, right? And we don't
Hmm.
know how, that if you've been fed on sugar and candy, do you really understand the value of a healthy meal? And so I think we're at this point where we are at a tipping point, and that
Hmm.
across our world, if we don't pull back from where we are and really start to examine how we got here and shift so that those ways of being are not the go-to ways in which we engage humanity, and that there is some joy and there is some respect and some kindness and some grace um, re-embedded into our society, where are we going to end up? And so I'm hopeful that we are in a place where people are going, yeah, this should be joyful. And joy does not mean weak. It
Right.
means joy.
Hmm.
I
Right?
like the whole idea of weird. Just stopping it and say that's weird.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's weird. It reminds me of, it's so simple. I mean, I thought we were doomed. Okay, we still may be, but I've got hope now. But it reminds me of the Mike Judd movie Idiocracy, when the guy comes out of the chamber, the frozen chamber, whatever, and says, "You're feeding crops Gatorade. Feed them water." That's as basic as it can get, and I think we're
Yeah.
learning that. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
there's so many weeds that we can't see the forest for the trees or whatever, that the
Mm-hmm.
analogy that works for that. But it reminds me of that. It's so simple. We had that feeling with Obama where we had hope and change and all that stuff. And all of a sudden that vanished and we forgot how we were there. And now there's hope,
Yeah.
at least for
Yeah.
a lot of us.
Yeah.
Well, I taper my hope because I like to think of myself as the sheepdog minding the flock and watching the tree line, because
Mhm.
some of us have to do that so we can defend the right to have joy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because the forces are out there. They're still going to be out there, and they're going to
Mhm.
try to crush the joy.
Mhm.
So somebody's got to fight them.
Yeah. I
So
agree.
I'm on the
Joyful
wall.
warriors. Joyful warriors. I
Yeah.
love that expression.
Yeah. So
So Michael, we want to respect your time. So
yeah.
I want to ask you a few questions. So
Sure.
a few of our closing questions, you
Mhm.
pretty much answered. We use the metaphor of starting from our base camp and coming back and sharing stories. You've done that pretty much. So I think that's pretty much understood. Who else should we bring to the program to bring in? And in doing so, if you give a name, you got to help us bring this person on so that
Mhm.
we can bring more Shaker excellence
Mm.
or stories. It doesn't have to be excellence in
Mm.
Well, definitely your
that
bestie,
stature.
Julie McGovern. I
Julie
mean,
McGovern Voisey, Kelly Richardson, um, Max Chernin, Andrew Kober. Um, there are Tracy Nicole Chapman, Kelly Chapman, um, Michael Tate. Uh, trying to think of more people in my class that I keep in touch with. Uh, yeah, those are people that come to my mind right away.
And
I'll send you an email list.
are those people in your atmosphere, in your Broadway atmosphere from Shaker, or how do they connect?
Two, Max Chernin and Andrew Kober, we did Sunday in the Park together, and Max is going to be on tour, a national tour of a show coming up that'll come through Cleveland. But we were all in Shaker Theater at different times. So was Tracy Nicole Chapman, but we were in at separate times.
Yeah.
Julie and I have remained friends since fourth grade. As I said, she was a cellist. She played in the orchestra and really valued that what being in an orchestra brought to her life artistically. Kelly Richardson is in the Maryland area and doing her own thing with her own business and has been, doing wonderful work on mental health in African American families because there seems to be a lack of conversation around those.
big time.
Right. And so I actually did one of her podcasts, and I'm actually going to do something else with her around those themes of how we support African American families when they're dealing with these issues and challenges that may come up. So they're from various places in my world. Jamie Babbitt, who became a director.
Yes.
She was a few years behind me. So there are lots of folk out there.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you for inviting me.
And thanks for responding so quickly. You had a target on you. You had a bullseye on you from when we came up with this program. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
If I don't respond right away, then it goes down the email rabbit hole, never to be seen again. So I try to stay on top of things.
Yeah, and I'm sorry with your response. That's what happens. I
good.
respond to messaging quicker.
And now we know you're down at Howard. So if I need to, come down, as a courier with with a personal message, I know where to go.
You know where to find me. You know where to find me. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for everybody listening. Check out the podcast. Here we were with Michael McElroy. Class of 85, Get Live, legend. Thank you, everybody. Next week, we have Joe Solo, a.k.a. Doug Klein. You've been watching The Shaker Heights. The experiences may vary. I'm one of your hosts, Wade Collivan.
I'm Eric Green, signing off.
We'll see you next week.
I have to show you my Knockbox. It's a system that comes with 15 labeled folders and 66 categories that organizes every single part of your life in case of an emergency or death. And it's not just the labeled folders. It also comes with detailed instructions so you know exactly what information you need to put in there and what your next of kin needs to do with it. Click on through the website so you can check out the deals this holiday season.